Hey, I am the Greg, one of the hosts of the Greg and Dave Show. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is John Lauder, host of The Cheap Seats here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, The Cheap Seats, where we talk about sports from the fans' perspective. A new show comes out every Monday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of The Cheap Seats. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello and welcome to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. My name is Bryce Burge.
And I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. With the World Cup now out of close for a couple weeks, Your Soccer Passport is back and will continue to travel around the soccer world to provide insight, community, commentary, interviews, and more. Today we'll talk about the big coaching change for the Mexican national team, and then we're also going to diving into the Community Shield and the English Premier League coming up as well.
Your Soccer Passport is sponsored by Squadcast, as podcasters that deal with analysts and guests from around the world. Being able to record remotely is key. Current industry standards rely heavily on internet connection, but Squadcast changes that with a simple browser-based tool that requires no additional software to install. The audio is recorded locally as high-quality WAV files, then uploaded to the host computer, allowing solid audio quality. To get started with your remote podcasting recording experience, go to squadcast.fm for your 14-day free trial. All right, you made mention of it in the intro, Yvonne. One of the interesting aspects of the Your Soccer Passport World Cup coverage was that we had a wide array of different pundits, but you and I personally only worked with each other once. It was just one of the weird things with scheduling. But I think for the fans, as we start now back into what club and country means for this show, I think we should probably introduce ourselves. So, Vaughn, why don't you take it away first? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what should fans expect from you in this podcast?
So for those who didn't hear me much on the World Cup podcast, my name is Ivan, and I focus a lot. My writing that I've done has been a lot about Mexican soccer. I'm a first-generation Mexican-American, so I grew up watching a lot of Mexican soccer in my house and with my family, and so that's been a big part of my world. And the national team that I hold near and dear is the Mexican national team, along with the U.S. national team. So I focus on both, and so you will get a lot of Mexican soccer insight from me in that regard. I'm also born and raised in Oregon, so you will get, when it comes to us talking about MLS and things of that nature, you are going to get a Oregon feel, a Northwest feel, a Portland feel from it. So I'm also very much a product of their environment. I grew up in Oregon, and I've lived in Portland the last 4 years. And I lived in the big city of Portland, and I am very much embedded in the soccer culture that is Portland. So that's kind of that. I follow soccer all around the world, and something that we'll talk about here as well with European soccer. And that's the cool thing about this podcast. I think we're going to be able to get into a lot of different niches, which is whether it's Latin American soccer, domestic soccer, or European soccer, broadening it or even expanding that as we continue. I think this is the first podcast of many, so people bear with us. We're figuring things out for ourselves as well to see what we want to do and how we're going to do it and what works best for us. But that's kind of right off the bat where I'm at least. Right.
Well, I come from a little bit of a different perspective in that case. Soccer is not my primary sport. I worked hockey and lacrosse for the longest time. Went to school, Northern Michigan University alum, covered anything from weird and wacky sports like Guts Frisbee National Championships, the ACHA National Championships, broadcasted those on radio, Facebook Live, stuff like that. Kind of bounced around between the written word with editorships at Cover 32 and Fansided, and kind of fell out of the game for a while. Just really wasn't feeling media. kind of hit like that professional lull and got a chance to come back to it with Your Soccer Passport World Cup edition. And it's been really fun. It's been a great opportunity for me to work out with people like you, Yvonne, that has such a great playing experience, and some other guys that we had on the show from Chile and with Russia ties and ties to the USL system and stuff like that. So I kind of felt like I was a little bit on the lesser side of the soccer spectrum, but I think now we've got the kind of odd couple scenario where if you check us out on Facebook and you look at the professional style photo with just your darling smile there in your goalkeeper gear, it kind of creates a good balance between the professional and the personal side of the sport. I think that's going to create a lot of good dialogue for people as they're looking for different things, because as we go around the world, there's going to be informational packets of quick tidbits that could mean the difference between whether or not you're going to care about that league, whether you're going to care about those people involved. And so between the two of us, we're going to find either an emotional or statistical connection for you as a listener. And I'm excited about that aspect and what we can bring to the show for you guys listening as well.
Yeah, and besides that, I played for a long time, and I was very lucky to play at a high level. And I coached for a while as well on a high school and college level. But as you say, you kind of have a little hockey background, like as somebody who coaches, and this is, for our listeners, as someone who coached, there is a lot of similarities between hockey and soccer when you talk about angles of it, defense, when you talk about marking off the puck, marking off the ball, the way you attack space, the way you create movement to create space for your other teammates' opponents. So even though you might not be in the same mentality that I am when it comes to soccer, there are similarities to what one sport brings to another sport, and that's the beauty of sports as well, that there's a connection to it.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to be one of the fun things too, as we continue to discuss, is that there's going to be a lot of comparison between other sports, other leagues, other opportunities to kind of show what kind of connections you can have. And this is a beautiful sport. Soccer is an amazing thing. It gets people all around the world crazy about not using your hands to kick a round object on a big empty field. And to draw the kind of emotions, the political history, the sporting history, the international history that this sport kind of creates, it's truly an amazing thing.
I agree, and that's something we hope that you guys get from us, the fact that we do love this sport, and that sometimes there's elitism to soccer that can kind of be felt, and hopefully that's not the vibe we get from you. Hopefully this is a very inviting podcast where you feel like if you've been watching and you've been following the game for a while, this is a podcast you can enjoy and relax with it. Or if you're new to it, hopefully you pick up some things and you like the little tidbits that we throw in there as well, because it is about the beautiful thing about soccer, because it's inclusion. It's all about including. And you saw that during the World Cup, the way you felt about it. As you said, you got back into it a lot from it. Yeah, that's what soccer does. You're able to find a connection through it, whether it's the people you know, a team you know, somebody you like, and just kind of get a niche to and kind of go from there.
Well, I think that's a good way to wrap up this first segment, just because there's no positive way to grow on that, just with the inviting, welcoming aspect of the sport. So hopefully you listeners feel ready to listen to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. Coming up after the break, our first topic is a big one for international play, as Juan Carlos Osorio finally leaves the Mexican national team. You're listening to Your Soccer Passport. Welcome back to Your Soccer Passport. Don't forget to check the show out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by searching the handles at Your Soccer Passport. This is Bryce Burge. With me is Yvonne Sanchez Carrasco, which I'm pretty sure that I will butcher a couple more times before I get that right, Yvonne. So I apologize for there. But it was never really a surprise for fans as after the World Cup was over that Juan Carlos Osorio was not happy with his spot as the manager of the Mexican national team. And for many members of the Mexican fan base and Mexican media, the door could not kick Osorio out of that role fast enough. But what is the real story here? What is it, where Osorio will go from the Mexican team to a new position, or is it more about what happens to the Mexican national team now as they look for a new skipper?
Well, first off, you are right that a lot of fans and pundits couldn't kick Juan Osorio out long enough, and that's very unfortunate because I thought Juan Carlos Osorio did a lot for Mexican soccer, and not only record-wise, yes, because he in the 52 games that he was in charge of Mexico, he had a 33 wins, nine draws, and 10 defeats, which is about 63%, which is as good as you can ask from an international manager. Besides that, he cruised Mexico in qualifying to the World Cup. They finished top in the CONCACAF Hex in qualifying, which Mexico has not done since, I believe, 1998. He is the first coach to go through the whole qualifying process without getting fired since Ricardo La Golpe in 2006. And he also got some important victories in Honduras, the first time they won there in about 50 years. They won in Canada for the first time in 30 years. They beat USA in Columbus for the first time. Juan Carlos Osorio as the Mexican coach. There was also some bad results. The 7-0 defeat to Chile in the Copa America was when people were really begging for him to get out. Last year in the Confederations Cup, when they lost to the Germany B team, quote unquote, 4-0 in the semifinals, was also something else. They didn't love the fact that he rotated players and rotated formations. And actually, it wasn't until the Sweden game in the World Cup that he had the same starting 11. He went 50 games without starting the same starting 11 while coaching Mexico. But also one of the things that I think one of the underlying reasons why people also didn't like Juan Carlos Osorio was because he wasn't Mexican, which is very sad and very, it's not for a country that's so inviting and so loving. As somebody who is Mexican, there is this acceptance of, you give us an inch, we'll give you a foot of embrace. The fact that they were so cold to somebody from a different culture, from a different country like Colombia, and they didn't like him because part of the reason was because he was Colombian coaching the Mexican national team. It's sad, but he handled it the whole time, the whole 3 years he was part of Mexico. He handled it with class, he handled it with professionalism, and I think he did. I think that's something that the future coaches could learn from, how he never took the bait from the pundits, from the fans who wanted a reaction out of him. He was always professional. He was always he was always class every time with the Mexican national team, and he took the responsibility to the heart. He respected the Mexican people. He respected the Mexican culture, and I think that's something and that I will always be thankful for. And he gave Mexican fans probably the best euphoric feeling we ever had when we beat Germany in the World Cup. He gave Mexico probably the best result they've had in the World Cup, that 1-0 win against Germany. And for the people who wanted him out and who want him out and are happy he's out, think about when Mexico scored that goal against Germany and that euphoric, orgasmic feeling when that goal went in. And that's a feeling I can't describe, and I won't be able to describe again because it's something that doesn't happen very often. And that game against Germany came off his game plan that he had, attacking specific spaces, being aggressive, and knowing that Germany was going to overcommit. So, I'd like to thank Juan Carlos Osorio for the time he took and how he gave the respect to the Mexican people, to the Mexican national team, when at times the pundits and times the fans didn't. He always handled it with class. And so I like to thank him for that. Thinking after, what's next for the Mexican national team and for Juan Carlos Osorio, I think he really wants to coach Colombia, his national team, or where he's from, and I think that's what he's hoping for next. He does have a very good connection and a very good. He spent a lot of time in the United States, so I think it wouldn't be out of the realm for him to coach the United States national team. And that might be the backup if he does not get the Colombian job. But with Peckerman out in Colombia, I think he would be in line to be coaching Colombia next. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's next for him. As for Mexico, there's been some names thrown around. The biggest one has been everybody wants Matias, who coached Chivas this last 2 years, Argentine, who played for Boca Junior, or who played for River Plate and won Chivas a few championships. He's the one a lot of fans like. It'll be interesting to see that. One of the things with the Mexican Federation is that the club owners have a lot of influence with the national team. So there is this conflict of interest, and there are a lot of people talking and saying who have a lot of input, and there's a lot of conflict in that. So with the Mexican national, it'll be interesting to see who they get. They always try to go for some big names and shoot up high, but then things always kind of tend to trickle down from there. So it'll be interesting to see. I think there's a lot of young, very good Mexican talent left. There'll be a few good amount of leftovers from this last roster to build off of too. So when it comes to Mexico in that regard, I think there's a lot of potential, but who knows? The big name has been Andre Villalobos, who coached for Porto, who coached at Chelsea, who's been in Russia. He was kind of the next Jose Mourinho in a way, and hasn't panned out that way for him. But the FMF have seemed to reach out for him as well. So we'll see what the Mexican national team does. Nobody expected Osorio to come out and coach Mexico, so who knows what they have in store in that regard.
That was an incredibly dense background there. There's a lot to go through, so let's try to reel this back and go one by one here, starting with the most recent stuff. Obviously, we're talking about where Mexico goes from here. I mean, Matias Almeida, that's a guy that a lot of people you would think would have a leg up with the way that the club owners in Mexico have such an influence, at least for me. I mean, he won the CONCACAF Champions League. He won Copa MX. So like when you have somebody that's there, because that's one of the things about Osorio that I think played into his constant roster changes more, was that he was always swapping people around. And I really, too, truly believe that there was some club influence involved in that caused some of that swapping around, because you did have some players that should have been out there to start, but they didn't. And so I think it was more, when you hear about how the players respected Osorio so much, I think it was more of just trying to appease the powers that be in Mexico at the club level. That being said, I mean, it'd be tough to get Villalobos in there. He's driving rally cars. He was in the Dakar rally race last month. So, like, I mean, he could be doing anything that he wants right now. So if the Mexican national team gets him, then it's not necessarily the giant surprise of the world, but it's also necessarily, why are you getting him? He's kind of out of it, and he's being brought back into a way. It's amazing to see how many options are there. I know there was a big push for La Volpe, who's, from my standpoint, is the Bruce Arena of Mexican national soccer. He's just always been there and is always in conversations and always well liked, and maybe that's deserved or not, but he'll be there enough to at least bridge a gap until they could find something that they do want to get, if they can't, because a lot of the names that I know a lot of Mexican sources have come out with have been super old, 60s and up. I mean, they're even talking about Peckerman leaving Colombia and going to Mexico and having just a straight up trade scenario at national helm leaders. So, it's interesting there. As far as kind of bringing it back a little bit to whether or not Osorio could be the next manager of the U.S. men's national team, that has gotten a heck of a lot more traction, especially with people and pundits in the American media, anywhere between New York Times just saying go out and steal them anyway before the World Cup was already done, or it could be Sports Illustrated saying that he's got the qualities and the X factors that will play off well with the young roster in the United States. It could be the international panel from ESPN saying that the only negative to Osorio right now is that he's too much like Jurgen Klinsmann and is straight from Mexico, so there may be some issues there in terms of just kind of political scene, or also just the rivalry between the Mexicans and the United States. That may be a little off-putting for fans, but I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's going to last 2 days. You're going to go out there on the first time that pitch goes, and the first time you have a lead. If Osorio becomes the new head of the men's national team, the first time you have a lead, all those things go away. So it's not as big of a deal as some people are trying to make it out to be. But it is interesting. You did bring up also Osario's American background. His background is a lot deeper than some of the other people that have been brought up that are not directly American in terms of who may be the men's national team coach. He actually played for the University of New Haven in Connecticut. He got his undergrad from Southern Connecticut State College. I think it was State College at the time, and now it's State University, before going over and finishing up degrees in the UK. But he managed the Chicago Fire. He managed the New York Red Bulls. In that time, he had a 21, 22, and 34 record, with most of those 34 losses being in the same 20-game stretch. So obviously it's a tough spot, but he also has a conference title underneath his belt in the MLS as well. So back when the Red Bulls were still the Metro Stars. So he's not completely out of the game. And honestly, most of his managerial helm come from post-MLS career, either in Colombian leagues or Latin American leagues, where he's got a record of 111, 61, and 68. That's insanely good. And for the U.S., I'm struggling right now to find a better candidate out there on the table. And with Colombia looming out there, if Osorio becomes the next head of the men's national team, it's got to be pretty soon. If we don't have an announcement by the 20th of August that he's the head of the men's national team, I don't think they're going to get him.
Yeah, I will say this. I think when it comes to resume in that regard, the only other coach I would honestly say who should be in the running for the U.S. men's national team, it should, like, if you are the U.S. if you're the people running U.S. soccer and you want a head coach, you look at Bob Bradley. Bob Bradley should be on top of the list. I think he's earned the right to coach the U.S. men's national team again. He got fired wrongly after the 4-2 loss to Mexico in the Gold Cup in 2011 because they wanted to bring in Jurgen. But besides him, I don't think the other names that have been named are up to what Osorio has done. He showed that he can get through CONCACAF and he can battle his way through tricky away fixtures in Central America and the Caribbean, something the USA were not able to do this last qualifying. He's shown that he's willing to give youngsters a chance. He gave over 70 players a chance to play for Mexico and a large range, a lot of young players. So he's not against giving young players a chance as well. So I think if it's not Osorio, if you're trying to get, I think Bradley's probably the next best qualified coach in that regard. But also there's a little bit of that stigma of you went back to the well with Bruce Arena, and now if you're going back to the well with Bradley, are you really, invoking change in U.S. soccer? but that's a different topic.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different topics there involved. Namely, do you want to have Michael Bradley's father coaching it again while he's at the twilight of his career? He's gone downhill the last couple of seasons, in my opinion, and that's never a situation where you want to cut your own kid.
I don't know. I feel like I also feel like LAFC is a very good gig too. So if I'm Bob Bradley, I probably don't want to leave LAFC right now to coach the women's men's national team. But I'm just saying that if there's one coach, if the next coach in line with the resume to coach US should probably be Bob Bradley. But if I'm Bob Bradley, I probably don't want to leave LAFC because that's a really good gig.
Yeah, there may be a couple of MLS guys in there, but it's going to be your second, third, or fourth option once you get past a couple of the big guys up top. Though that does bring up the interesting argument, and I'm just going to take a 2-sentence response for time. Is Miguel Herrera back in the conversation for the head of the men's national team?
For Mexico or for US?
For Mexico. Well, either or.
Well, he is coaching Club America again, which, it's one of the top 2 biggest clubs in Mexico. I don't think if he was offered the job, he would say no to the men's national team for Mexico. I hope he doesn't take it. I think he was exposed, especially in that knockout game in 2014 against Holland. He's very charismatic and he can get his players up, but he lacks in-game tactical adjustments. And I think and that's why Mexico lost in 2014. It wasn't because of the PK that shouldn't or should not have been called on Rafa Marquez against Robin in 2014. It was because he lacked the ability to make the adjustments and make the proper subs against a Holland team that adjusted once Mexico scored. And the last 30 minutes, he was completely outcoached. He also is very hot-headed, and he loves the media when they love him, and then once they turn on him, he turns on them, and it just becomes this big drama, and it becomes a telenovela, which Mexican pundits love and Mexican fans love, but it doesn't help the men's national team. And that's what I was talking about with Osorio, that he never fell into that. He never made coaching Mexico a soap opera. He made it he just respected the job. So I hope Osorio doesn't take it for those reasons.
All right. Well, that was a long discussion about probably the biggest international coaching issue right now, especially for people close to home with the U.S. and Mexican national teams, as Osorio is officially out as the manager of the men's national team for Mexico. All right, so now that is wrapped up, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, it will be Community Shield, Chelsea versus Man City, your wrap-up on that as you're listening to your Soccer Passport. Time now for our worldwide headlines here on Your Soccer Passport, a segment touching on some of the other big news from around the soccer world. The U.S. women's national team won their first Tournament of Nations Friday, August 3rd, with a stunning 4-1 victory over the Brazilians. The Americans needed to win by 2 or more to take the title on goal differential after Australia's earlier win in the day against Japan. But Rose Lavelle, Julie Ertz, Tobin Heath, and Alex Morgan all got a tally for the win and the eventual title. The MLS All-Stars fell in penalty kicks to Juventus on a Wednesday, August 1st. Andrea Favilli scored first for the Serie A side, while MLS leading scorer Joseph Martinez had the lone score for the MLS to equalize. Juventus won the PK round 5-3. Real Madrid midfielder Toni Kroos has been named Footballer of the Year by Sportswriter in Germany for the first time. Kroos was part of the Madrid side that won a third successive Champions League title, as well as the UEFA Super Cup, Spanish Super Cup, and Club World Cup. Today's worldwide headlines are brought to you by Public House Media in honor of Press Row and Choose to Rise being nominated for the 2018 Podcast Awards. The voting is closed and winners will be announced later this week. Congrats to those podcasts for their continued success with Public House Media. And welcome back to Your Soccer Passport. I'm Bryce Burge. Ivan Sanchez Carrasco also here. If you haven't figured out from his first segment, Ivan has some amazing writing that you could read for yourself if you follow him on Twitter. His handle is at Ivan Sanchez C90. If for some reason you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that as well. I am at that Bryce Burge, Bryce with an I, not a Y. The McDonald's FA Community Shield was Sunday as the English Premier League champs Manchester City faced off against the FA Cup winning Chelsea side, and everything seemed to go right for Man City. Ivan, this game really wasn't much of a contest as Man City won 2-0.
Yeah, Man City kind of just kind of continued rolling where they were off last season and pretty dominant right from the start. It wasn't completely a surprise. I mean, City and Chelsea were both missing some players. It is kind of a glorified friendly in that regard, but you see also the difference between a team who's had a coach now entering their third season with Pep Guardiola, and you have Chelsea with a new coach trying to get their new philosophy, trying to get their new idea of how they want to play, and you have a well-oiled machine in City who can just kind of plug players in and they know what the rules are. They know what the idea. They know how the style of play they want to do. And I think when you think about it in a larger perspective, as we look forward to the EPL season, I think this kind of it's a good opening statement for City to say, we are ready to defend the title. As for Chelsea, I think it shows that they're going to be a work in progress the first half of the season. And there's also there's only a few more days in the transfer window. So for Chelsea, I think one of the big looming things of the team is Hazard going to stay? Is Contao going to stay in goal too for them? Or are they heading off to a place like Real Madrid? I think those things are also lingering. You see a team like City, you kind of have everything very well organized and very well set in place for the rest of for the first half of the season. And you have a team like Chelsea who are not sure what they are right now for the first half of the season. And I think you saw that in a game where City pretty much dominated.
Dominated is right. 18 shots, 9 of which on goal for City compared to just 5 and 2 for Chelsea. It was kind of a soft defense too. All 4 individual players for Chelsea really seemed to struggle as Sergio Aguero scored both goals for City. It was his 200th goal as well in a Man City uniform. So congrats to Aguero there. You did talk about the injuries as well as the new coaching scenario, and I do think that that's a bigger issue for Chelsea compared to Man City. Man City can't learn anything about this. To them, it was a glorified friendly, but Chelsea at least had the opportunity to get more time out there, and they do have another friendly coming up with a club team. I don't think it's Paris Saint-Germain, but it may be another one of the French teams. And I can't remember right now, but they didn't do anything in the offensive third besides a couple of decent set pieces off of a corner. So it was kind of a boring matchup. The only previous time that these two teams actually met up for the Community Shield was in 2012, where Man City won 3-2, and that was a lot more exciting of a game than this one was to watch. So I think a lot of fans felt a little cheated by that. But I mean, ultimately Chelsea, as they move forward, we finally get a chance to see with our own eyes the struggles that they've had and not just read about the injuries or the lack of cohesion due to a new coach and new philosophy. So that's a big one now for us fans. Any last comments on the Community Shield?
Yeah, I think in Chelsea, part of it too, Sadi, who came from Napoli in Italy, it's also a huge change of philosophy. Before him, you had Conte, who was a very disciplined and very, lock it in, and we kind of counter and we attack spaces in that sort of manner. It's a complete different philosophy and a complete different identity than what the people who are kind of used to Chelsea are expecting. Because even before Conte, Mourinho was also there was a very unique, at times ugly philosophy of like we are hunkering down. At times it won't be pretty, but we're going to grind out victories. If you watch the way Napoli played in Europe, they're one of the most entertaining, or in Italy, they're one of the most entertaining teams in Europe with their attack and their no-hold bar. So it's a complete change in mentality and philosophy and how you want to attack a game. And it's hard to completely change that in 3 weeks with what Sarri's had to work with. So I think for Chelsea, this is probably more of a 2-year project than a 1-year project, because to completely change that type of mentality might take half a season. And in the EPL, the way how competitive it is, you can very quickly fall back from the pack if you're not up to par to kick off with. So I think for Chelsea, it might be a rough start to the season when you talk about a coach who wants to apply completely, to just trying to change the mindset completely of not only how you attack, but the why you want to attack, and even when you had the lead to continue attacking. And yeah, it's a complete different it's a whole new reign going down in Chelsea right now from a mindset from top to bottom in that regard. So I think that mentality, it's going to be a slow start for Chelsea, but I think the fruit might prosper in the long run. But you saw the first steps of it here, of a completely new way to approach a game.
Well, approaching the game will be key for Chelsea as they move forward. It's definitely going to be something important for us to follow up as the EPL season will kick off soon. That will bring us to the guest that we will have on next week's show. That will be Matt Pocket. He'll join us to talk about the EPL. He's a huge Arsenal fan, so he'll have a chance to do that. Matt Pocket is the sports director of Sovereign Communications and the voice of Lake Superior State Athletics from Sault Ste. Marie, which spans Michigan and Ontario, Canada. So remember to subscribe to Your Soccer Podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever your favorite podcasts are found to be able to hear that, as well as all of our future episodes. I'm Bryce Burge.
I'm Ivan Sanchez.
And you've just listened to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media.